There's probably a lot of noise right now, but you might be able to hear the rain if I'm quiet. Oh no. Windows is informing me that my USB devices are malfunctioning. What's new? I think it just didn't like my USB analyzer. That's okay. Anyway, welcome back to the stream, folks. Here's the state of things. The robot is currently not quite on, although I was about to turn it on. The demo Mac is updating, and here I am in the shop. Not in the rain, but under the rain. Have I turned off, or have I turned on enough of this robot that I can actually power the gimbal? That cat tracking. Hey dude, you don't need that collar. Camera kept getting distracted by me, I guess. We were getting unlucky and not, I guess, getting good views of Tuco that the object detector could recognize as a cat. And then, oh, Vince asks, Tuco has a collar. Well, he has a collar. He doesn't usually wear it. He likes wandering around in the hall in my warehouse building sometimes. And I often put a collar on him so that I can... Actually, that's kind of something that I was going to bring up on a stream at some point. So he's got just a basic, like, cloth collar, but I zip-tied a tile to it so I could track him over Bluetooth. And that actually works pretty well, but the tiles are annoying because they're designed to be disposable. And, actually, I can go grab his collar. I just have to put some tape over it because it's also got my phone number on it, and I don't really want to give away my phone number to just absolutely everybody. So I'll be right back. Pardon the weird censorship, but I already get enough unwanted phone calls. Anyway, basically, I guess we should switch back to the camera. Just to get on a tangent about Tuco's collar, I guess this is also my daily reminder to format the SD card. But yeah, basically it helps me find him if he wanders off and gets stuck elsewhere in the warehouse, which has happened like twice. So not very often, but enough that it's nice to have a way of finding him easily. And he usually just hangs out right by the shop. And one day he got lost for like 2 days, I think, and it was because he actually got into somebody's studio downstairs and then got stuck inside when they locked it. So he's got a collar like this. It has some embroidery with his name and my number, and then it has my temporary solution for just zip tying a tile to him. And this is just a little Bluetooth locator. I can use my phone to either make this beep, not just like beep, but like plays little noise with its piezo speaker. It's actually kind of nice. You can use them both directions. You can have the phone buzz this. There's actually a button you can use to buzz the phone. You use the same button for pairing. It's a good little device, except that it's designed to be disposable. You just buy new ones every year or so. And so I've only done that, like, I think I've bought like 2 of their sets, and I'd really like to not buy more because I hate buying stuff like that. And I've taken one apart already. They're really annoying to disassemble, but it is possible, and they don't go back together at all. So one project potentially is to just design a 3D printable enclosure that's like a refit enclosure for one of these that I've taken apart and replaced the battery in, and that also attaches to a cat collar easily. So that would be cool. Anyway, as you can see, this is still on my desk. It should be pretty quick to put the sides back on and just get it out of my desk, and then we can get back to working on winches, because I want to get the winches put together. Those are also taking up a lot of space in my stream, in my shop here. Oh yeah, streaming with live captioning would be really cool. That also sounds expensive currently. It sounds like it'll probably be cheap in the future, but I don't think it is right now. Oh, I have like some kind of weird injury on my wrist. Cool. Alright, I think the sides go on and then the top. I might end up with a couple of leftover parts. I have one lock washer that I don't know where it goes, and this little metal tab, which I think I know where it goes, but I don't want to guess wrong, because guessing wrong could involve shorting something out, and leaving it out just means there's slightly less EMI resistance, I think. I think it's to provide a better low resistance or low impedance path between one of the grounds and the case in a particular place, but all of the screws are providing the exact same ground. So I have to imagine it's for grounding just specifically the side panels on the top of the case. So I don't know. It just seems like there are many other ways that that same thing can happen. Oh, I wonder if it could be. No, it's got to be something that contacts this unanodized part of the case. And I think it went on basically the same post as this brush, which also doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah, that's weird. I don't think it's quite important enough for me to just go back and review the video to see exactly where it fell off, so I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to put the case mechanically back together. And there's one extra lock washer, so something might be less locked than it's supposed to be. I used most of the lock washers on the nuts for the sub-D connectors, like the serial and the DVI, and all of those seem to have lock washers. So there's probably just one other lock washer that I didn't notice when I was taking it apart. I don't currently have any coffee to drink. I just drank a big cup right before starting the stream, so I think I'll be alright. But I might have to make some. Oh, yeah, Denny and Mary says, can you rewind the stream when you did the assembly and see what you missed? Yeah, I mean, I'm in like a video studio and I'm recording video of all of this, so like, yeah, there's lots of material I could review. But, for something like this, I don't really care that much. For something actually important, then yeah, I would definitely do that. Oh, I think that goes under this piece. Yeah. Ooh, there's the nice fit. Cool. I think the easiest thing to do now is to attach the side to the front. Oh, maybe those are the long ones? See, now I have two different kinds of screws left. I've basically got short and long. They're all countersunk machine screws now, which is nice. Which means I've definitely I've definitely missed where that, where the lock washer goes, because it would definitely not go with any of these countersunk screws. So at this point, I'm looking for the patterns, and I've got these 4 that are longer and a different color. And I think maybe the longer ones go here, because there's a lot more depth to this assembly where you've got these nuts that are actually, I think, like welded or pressed into the back extrusion. So I think you need the longer bolts there, so I think that's the ticket. And then all the rest of these are just one layer of sheet metal into another layer of threaded sheet metal, so I think the thinner screws go there. The mechanical design for this makes a lot of sense, and except for the couple of things I'm unsure about, it's all been pretty obvious where stuff goes back together in this. And these are Torx T8. There's been a mixture of Torx and just hex keys in this build. A little bit of Phillips head on the camera. I don't think we've seen... Oh, no, there's been... No. I don't know if there's been any Phillips head in this, actually. There were some screws on the RCA line-out jack, line in and line out, which really seemed like they should have been Phillips head, but they were Torx. So, yeah, I think this build has been mostly Torx, which is neat. Looks pretty elegant and all that. All right, and then, yeah, that definitely looks right. And then down here, we have, oh, you can't even see that on camera now. These 3. Same size. Oh, the noise. Yeah, Tuco has a very loud litter box ritual. After he poops, he just scrapes at whatever's nearby. So in this case, it's a box. It's usually the edge of the litter box or the shelf nearby or something like that. And I've tried giving him different things. Like I tried putting some, like when I used to have the litter box upstairs, there was a wall nearby and I put a little carpet square up on that wall on the assumption that he'd want to like wipe his paws on the carpet square, and no, he didn't like that at all. And so I've just been iteratively trying to figure out what he likes. Right now there's a carpet square under the litter box, and he seems kind of okay with that, but he'll still attack whatever's nearby. Alright, let's do the same thing on the other side now. This is an impressive box. So this thing is a whole network of computers. It's like literally 11 Linux machines. It has 10 ARMs, which are so under this heatsink there's a row of these DaVinci TMS320 processors, which those are dual core with some kind of fast TMS320 based DSP, and also like a 600 megahertz ARM9 core. And so those all run, I think, Linux. And then there's a PowerPC kind of management processor with a full strength 133 megahertz PCI bus coming out of it that runs kind of oversight for the system and the UI and the main Linux install and all that. It's such a beast. And so those mezzanine connectors, among the many jobs they have, is to carry full strength PCI. Oh, there we go. It's a little sheet metal puzzle. I say sheet metal, this stuff is actually really thick. I think this would be described as aluminum plate more than sheet metal. Well, the stuff on the back, I think, is still bent sheet metal, but the sides, I think, are legit, just like extrusions. And the front is machined. Oh my, yeah, this is. I think this is a machined L extrusion, or something like that. Hey Took, don't go nipping in the power supply. Oh yeah, Ear asks, I wonder why they have different architectures in there. Yeah, it is a little weird, the mix of PowerPC and ARM. I mean, it was probably just whatever they had that had the right interfaces, because the ARM was kind of, came free with their DSP core, and the PowerPC, I'm guessing, was attractive because it had all the peripherals they wanted. The datasheet for it seems to make a big deal out of the like bus interfaces and like using it as a PCI host for a bunch of peripherals, which is exactly what they're doing here. Oh. I need to adjust this camera angle because this is really cute. Yeah, there really is a lot of different architectures. So they've got the Altera Cyclone 3 FPGAs. I don't know if there are soft cores on the FPGAs or not. There's at least one Atmel microcontroller. It was like an ATmega 644. There's all the ARM9s. There's the PowerPC. Umar, the person who's kindly donating this gear, he was also answering some questions in the chat on the last couple streams, and he mentioned that they're like touchscreen controllers for these two, and then those run Windows. I forget what flavor of Windows, if it was like embedded or what. I think this is later than CE would have been still viable. Oh, there it goes. Cool. I think we're down to the top panel. This top panel was my first well, not my first, but like one of the best first indications of just how overbuilt this thing is. So this top piece is just flat machined aluminum plate that's anodized and has regions masked off from the anodization. It's all very nice. But then these other brackets are actually extrusions that are then MIG welded. I think this is MIG weld. So this is an extrusion with holes in it. Clearly the autofocus is more interested in Tuco, and so are all of we. That's fine. But just, you know, these little blobs are MIG welds, if you don't believe me. And that's just to provide, on this side, threaded holes, and then on this side, a little lip that actually holds on. Oh yeah. So that copper assembly, if I could actually get it on there, that's what grounds this entire thing too. That's great. Oh, cool. Okay. This isn't quite going to be lined up as beautifully as it comes out of the factory, I'm sure. It is somewhat interesting to run with the case open. There are a bunch of LEDs on the board. There are like link and activity LEDs for all the internal Ethernet ports. There are debug LEDs for all the power rails on all the boards. But it does seem like there's a lot to do just via software that won't really require physical access to this. And, you know, when we do need back in, it's easy enough to open this thing up. Duke's helping out. Keeping an eye on these screws. It's his area of expertise. We are almost out of parts. I think the only leftover parts are going to be one lock washer, that one brush that I wasn't sure where it went back, and a tiny bit of copper tape where I know where that goes back, but I would need to replace it with fresh copper tape, and I'm slightly too lazy to care. It was for EMI on the USB device port. I can always put that back next time I'm in here. It's making me nervous how close Tuco's mouth is to my soldering iron cable. I have not seen him chewing on that one yet, but it is something to watch out for. I've got to just keep this inventory in my mind of what kinds of cables Tuco likes, and then be really careful to cover those up. Ideally, I would just cover all the cables, but there are a lot of cases where that isn't practical. Oh yeah, I think I'm gonna have the right number of these screws. That's great. So if you want to see us play around with this a little bit with it powered on, you can take a look at the end of last night's stream archive. If you seek to the bit where we're actually playing with it, we poke around via the serial and SSH a little bit and get a root shell, and I kind of got distracted looking for a way to escalate from the like administration console to the root shell, because that would be useful. Because as it was, I could only get to root via telnet, not via SSH. But I'm sure there are a bunch of other ways to achieve the same goal, such as, for example, just adding another user. So it was a bit of a distraction, and I just was having fun poking around in the system. It would be interesting to get into the ARM binaries as well, or the ARM systems as well. They're just visible on the network, but we didn't have Nmap. It would have been nice to just port scan them, but no Nmap. One thing that would be nice is to just compile some more tools to send over. It had a surprising amount of stuff in the image, though. It wasn't BusyBox. It was like a full core utils image. And it even had some surprising stuff like strace was in there, and GDB. So yeah. But one thing that might be useful is we did find, I think Emily in chat found the actual like firmware binaries, in which we could also just like DD out of the flash memory. But it's handy to just analyze that on a different system with something like binwalk. And in that case, you can find the various embedded binaries. And for example, even if we don't have code execution on the ARM CPUs yet, we could get an idea of what they're set up to do and find services that are running and figure out how they accept commands, for example. So here are the leftover parts. The camera really knows what's important. It's okay. We all do. So I'm going to put this stuff aside and bring some winch over. Oh, look at that beast. This is the biggest phone in my shop. Just just by a lot, actually. It's a really big phone. It also idles at like 100 watts. I keep jokingly calling it a phone, but it's so much more sophisticated than that. I mean, the reason it's so big is that it's processing a bunch of concurrent video streams because it's basically a point-to-point video wall system. So you have a bunch of cameras and a bunch of screens, and you link to a bunch of cameras and a bunch of screens in a different site, and that's what it does. So it's pretty neat. It does seem like the kind of thing that could be adapted to kind of television studio equipment. So, right now, well, so we've been focusing on the other aspects of this Tuco Flyer project for a while, and I'm realizing that it isn't even pointed at the cat. Let's see if we can get a better cat shot. Too far? I wonder how the computer vision's doing with this particular pose. Go, go, gadget HDMI switch. Actually, I don't have the computer vision on the HDMI switch right now. Oh yeah, it's doing fine. Let's try the Twitch side channel stream, since it seems like it might be interesting now. So the robot, when it's operating, will be streaming out at twitch.tv/TucoFlyer. So I just started that up, or tried to. So that'll be showing this same camera view, but continuously and with some debug information. Well, it's a blend of debug and entertainment at the moment. There's actually a mix of kind of lower level stuff and just these little cat sprites that dance around where the computer vision's looking. Oh yeah, yeah. So maybe I should demo that. My demo machine is rebooting with updates right now, but yeah, maybe just for some quick context, it would be useful to show just a really brief clip of one of the sort of systems like that. So that big box I was just putting together, it's designed to run like an entire room basically, and there's some good video demos of how these are supposed to work if I can get my computer to wake up. There we go. Something is really annoyed at my USB devices. Is it my Space Mouse? There are a lot of USB devices happening. Ooh, here's a...
The Tamberg C90, the most powerful and flexible video engine available, delivering the ultimate video and audio quality.
The ultimate in video and audio quality. You hearing this? Does this have any info? I'm a little worried about the copyright bot matching on any of the audio, so I have it muted. This is just not that informative, but how about... This one? Umar, who's the one who sent this stuff, he actually posted a nice video in chat a couple of streams ago, but it was not this one. Wow, compositing and blending? Yeah, okay, that's compositing. Oh, this is part of how they do the like full width room layouts with many cameras. And like plan videos on your teleconference. I mean, you could do a lot of that with just regular PCs and GPUs now without any kind of complicated software, but 10 years ago I suspect hardware acceleration was pretty mandatory. Yeah, they can do presentations and stuff, yeah. Anyway, that's not a very good demo. I misplaced the actually good video. So, let's see if the demo machine is awake yet. No. Come on, I got USB. Don't worry. Why you see my USB keyboards? Oh, it would help if I had the KVM on the right channel. Cool. Pepcac. This will be helpful for getting winch documentation. So let's have that handy. Oh, what a cat. Oh yeah, Hint says the HDMI barf looks interesting. Yeah, I'm curious exactly what that is. I think it's basically just junk in the FIFO buffer of frames in the HDMI, not the HDMI switch, but in the HDMI to USB 3 grabber that I'm using. I think it just has an FPGA that slurps in frames into a ring buffer and then they slurp out over USB. And I think it just doesn't handle all the error conditions gracefully and just will dump out malformed frames. So it's like a mix of uninitialized DRAM and misformatted frame contents. Okay, we are back to a working demo machine, a happy cat, and a clean desk. That's delightful. So, we have one winch which is pretty much completely built, and 3 which have mostly built mechanics and largely just need wiring. So we've got a wiring diagram in the form of a table in the bot firmware Git repository. So right here. So we'll just need to wire a lot of this stuff up. A lot of these aren't even related to the winch. So winch stuff is here at the bottom, plus the common stuff at the top, which are just LEDs. So yeah, it's not too bad. And we can use the first working winch as reference. And in fact, speaking of using the working winch as reference, since the software stack has changed a bunch, I want to just do a really quick test with the original winch and just make sure it still works as we expect it to. We have it right here on the desk. Let's just plug it in. let's also get the web interface for the robot handy, because that will be necessary. Network shares. My method for connecting currently involves using a network file system to transfer the key that I then use to connect over my challenge response HTTP WebSocket protocol. It's kind of weird. There we go. So this is the Windows machine's file system. I could use that QR code if I was on a phone. I could also just paste this into Chrome. Dan is asking what my thoughts are of using multi-core cable instead of rope winding in the reel. Like steel cable. I like the paracord because it's kind of stretchy and compliant, and that I think will help avoid the system storing and releasing a lot of energy unexpectedly, and will help damp out vibrations. So, I mean, basically I think that something built around like this paracord can be a lot safer and nicer to have around humans and animals than something made around steel cable. Or are you asking about some other kind of cable? Oh, data cables? But then you need a slip ring. You need a way to have the rotating cable and the non-rotating cable interface. And I don't know of slip rings that can get DVI or SDI video across. I mean, slip rings in general just like mess up your data. So I would need an architecture that's really designed for that. You could use slip rings for power and then use wireless data, but then that's not going to give me the kind of fidelity and latency I want. I don't really like this. This is like, oh, you're still on that monitor. This is like a batch of, oh yeah, this needs replacement, right? These don't even stay in their housing. See? Those just want to come out of their housing, and then they're gonna like short circuit on stuff. Ugh. So let's keep those in there for now, and then replace these ASAP. This is the connector that goes to the LEDs on the shell, and that definitely needs to be replaced. So that's something else we should do on this particular winch. But for now, I'm just going to leave that off and plug this into just power and network. So I've got a network cable for the robot network. Not the general shop network, but the special robot network. And then let's put the high voltage further away from Tuco. Alright, let's get this all up on the screen. So I can still use this remote actually to put this in manual winch control mode. So for example, flyer mode. Halted is one button, manual flyer is another button, and so you can see those affect the gimbal too, between halted and manual flyer. I can also go between manual flyer and manual winch, and you'll see manual winch actually takes a parameter, so I can cycle between all the winches by pressing that one, or I can go back to flyer. The gimbal behaves the same in both of those modes. So if I'm in manual winch mode, and then so that was the gimbal, but if I use the left stick, then I should be able to run the winch up and down. And I can see what I'm doing using this section. So, network's plugged in. I think Tuco Oh, I don't like running this with Tuco so close. Maybe I'll... Can I hold this? Then the high voltage is on my lap instead of on the table. Let's just put this over here. I really don't want to redesign this thing to have cable in the winch right now. I get that that's a thing that could happen. It just didn't seem like a good idea. It seemed like a better idea to keep the data cable separate. The data cable is also just really big. Like, I would have to redesign the cable in many ways to make it stronger. And I feel like the cable and the slip rings would both be pretty expensive in that case. So maybe that would be a thing to do in the next version if it seems like a good idea after researching it. But like, I thought about that, and from the investigation I did briefly, it seemed like it would not work well. There's got to be a next version unless you just want me to keep redesigning things without ever finishing them. You have to have a way of having another design in your head that you would build if you were building another version, and then you take those ideas that you would just keep redesigning and just put them in the next version. That's what it's for. There's some data. So this winch is still happy. Can we run it? Whoa, whoa, yes, yes, we can. Its control loop is a little slow right now, but we can certainly run it. And yeah, the control seems reversed now because it's about the direction of the load, not the direction of the rope at the winch right now. Which maybe for manual winch mode, that's the wrong way to think about it. Yeah, maybe I should just change that in the code right now before it's too confusing. I don't know, it's fine if I know what to expect. Oh, this is nice and smooth. I really like these winches. I hope they work out. Okay, so that was a winch. That was winching pretty nicely. And it seems like we didn't break that in any extremely significant way. So, let's unplug this and go back to examining the state of all of the winches and trying to make them all work this well. I have to say, one thing that maybe doing this kind of like in-depth live streamed engineering work is good for is busting people's fantasies about what engineering is like. How much access do we have here? I think we might need to warm up the soldering iron. This is also not the optimal gimbal position. Bring the camera a little closer. No, like seriously, I don't understand why people think this is so different from like how things are usually built. I mean, like here we are on the same show taking apart a thing which clearly had orders of magnitude more effort put into it than what I'm doing here on this cat cam. And then in the same show, people are like incredulous about how much effort is going into the cat cam. And I thought that those two things might mesh a little more. Oh, Joseph is asking if they missed a stream where the gimbal tracking was improved. Possibly. I don't know. I don't know which streams you've seen. I just want to get out of the way of the camera so it can see Tuco. Anyway, I think we really want that view. Stop being so modest. No, I'm actually really serious about this. The way stuff is built is not that different than what I'm doing here. Like this is like usually I mean, not as many people just do solo projects like this. So usually it's like a bigger team, and you have a lot of the you know, a lot of the kind of chaos that comes from that and the way things are designed and, you know, the communication that happens. But like at the level of like the actual engineering decisions that are getting made and the realities of it, like this isn't me setting out to try to build something that's super complicated and weird. This is just me turning the crank on the engineering process. And so like there's nothing surprising about any of this to me. Like this is just looking at the constraints that I'd given myself and the constraints that were imposed on me by the environment and trying to solve the problem given those. And there's nothing unusual about any of this. That's what I'm trying to that's what I'm trying to show, both by doing this and by taking things apart. There's a lot of bad wiring in this. I think I might leave the sensor stuff because it's just so non-critical and seems to be working. I'm going to replace this LED connector though because it's just so bad, and I have better ones. I had a box of replacements right around here somewhere. Oh, don't get buzzy, little gimbal. I can't tell which axis is vibrating the most, because they're all a little buzzy. I missed the preparatory step of locating this box of connectors. I didn't realize I'd misplaced it. Well, we could do that in a different order. I want these at some point for this build, though. Oh, is it up here? Oh, I think this is it. Yay. Cool, found it. I mean, yeah, it's like just it's amazing how much effort goes into these things that people take for granted. Is just been, I don't know, it's just like this thing that just seems like painfully obvious to someone who's been doing this kind of stuff for any length of time, but that is still maybe not really apparent outside. I don't know. I mean, that might just be like a general like life wisdom thing, just like noticing that most of the things around you are way more complicated than they appear. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the engineering effort behind this just goes so deep because, especially if you're used to the kinds of projects where you're doing, like, I feel like there are these sort of different orders of magnitude of complexity you end up reaching, and so the kinds of projects a lot of people do are like something that you can integrate. Like you get like one kind of main thing, like an Arduino or a particular system on a chip, and then you add a couple of add-ons to it, and now you have your thing. And that's a particular level of difficulty. But then you have stuff like that video codec, where it's like this entire little ecosystem all to itself, with these different subsystems that all communicate with each other, and then all have different power requirements, and then just imagining all the complexity that results from that, and then all the little problems you end up having to solve that to a bystander might not seem to have anything to do with the ultimate problem you're trying to solve. So, yeah, basically what John Bonds just said, I feel a lot of people still don't realize how much money and time is thrown into R&D on these products. Yeah, for sure, like R&D in general is just really, really complicated and time consuming. And like that's what we're doing here is R&D. I mean, it's building a thing, but it's also gaining the knowledge about how to build that kind of a thing so that we can build more. And yeah, I mean, I don't know whether there is going to be another version of this product or project. I think it depends on whether, how useful it is to me, how many other people like want one, how much we want to make it easier to build them. And so those are like very, very open questions. But sure, I mean, it seems natural to accumulate ideas for what to do if that stage occurs. Like, clearly having a circuit board designed for the winches would make the wiring a lot easier. And there are a lot of ways the mechanical design could be simpler and easier to assemble. And there are some parts I would consider maybe getting a small lathe for to help with concentricity, like, kind of issues. And yeah, so there's stuff like that. But this is a prototype. And so the goal is to try to balance the amount of effort we spend on making this one such that, we don't throw too much away overall. I want to make something, and I mean, you might think, well, this is a lot of effort for something that's just like a thing. But I guess this is my intuition that if I don't make it at least a certain amount of good, then it will definitely get thrown away because I just won't be able to use it. And so I want it to be something that will at least work well enough that I can use it fairly continuously for a while. And then, if it turns out to be useful, then there's opportunity for a revision too. And at this point, that could be something that I do just like piecemeal, like, oh, well, I like most of this project, but I want to put some more sensors on the flyer, or I want to try out a new winch design. And if I try out a new winch design, I don't even necessarily have to replace all the winches at once, assuming they have compatible protocols. So yeah. Yeah, lots of good comments on chat. And yeah, a couple of good points about how a lot of what you see out in the world requires stuff that spreads across disciplines, and that sometimes it's hard to see the total sum of work from just inside one of those parts. Yeah. Yeah, and even, it's interesting, I would see that even within products that were purely software. Like, I know I've talked about my time working on VM stuff at VMware a bit on the stream, and, oh, I just noticed Tuco's under the desk. Can the camera see him? And even there, it was all software, but it was so many different kinds of software. And so I think people didn't often appreciate the amount of detail and effort that went into other people's domains. And even stuff that was not software, right? You had, like, you're producing software, but you have people working on designing the user experience and, you know, designing the way that the software is tested. And we even had people designing hardware that was used for the automated testing of the software. So there was just so much hidden effort. I mean, and that's actually something that's been important to me for a while because, you know, like, I mean, maybe it's because I had this fantasy as a kid that there was something inherently valuable about effort, or maybe it's because, hey, Tuco, I know you want to touch this. Oh, I think I threw it somewhere soft. That's going to be tough for him. You know, or maybe it's because I appreciated so much being able to take apart other people's code and see the details that were left in there. And, you know, like, I've always been into, like, I've never programmed for the C64, but I really like the ethic that you see in, for example, the C64 demo scene, where code is poetry and you read other people's poems and celebrate them. And so that kind of stuff, I don't know, I like that, but I think getting older has also shown me just how much effort just goes unappreciated, and just because we don't know how to hear it, or we don't like know what to look for. You know, people spend all this time making sure that a program is, is easy to use, or installs correctly on your operating system, or doesn't have kernel crash bugs, and so much of that you just don't even really see it because it's this abstract thing that, like, once it's done, you can kind of point to the pieces that make that up, and they all seem to make sense, and they seem simple, and you can imagine having made them quickly, but actually going through the process of making them is just not something you can necessarily rush any more than people already do. Alright, well, I was also kind of absent-mindedly unwrapping this thing and playing with a hair tie. So these are from Adafruit. They're much nicer than the random, terrible knockoff JSTSMs that I was getting from random Amazon sellers. And I've already been having problems with these. I mean, I just showed you how these crimps keep coming out of their housing. And they also have electrical connection problems. Whereas these are genuine JSTs, and Adafruit resells them, and they're beautiful. And let's use those. Oh, sorry, I missed some questions on the YouTube chat until now. DFGA is asking if I read YouTube chat. Well, I usually do. Sometimes I get distracted, sorry. Oh, wow. Baymax88 said, just came by to tell you after watching your streams I started learning Python. Oh, that's awesome. Python's great. I hope you have a great time with it. And then Motorman2112 is asking if this is a TG165 and how well it works for me. Yeah, this little thermal camera is a TG165, and it's a nice little device. My only complaint about it really is that I can't share it with you super easily because I can't stream it like I can the one that plugs into my phone. So I also got a... So I bought this one a while ago. This was like my first thermal camera, and it's really nice. It's low resolution, and it doesn't have the ability to just give you a calibrated temperature for every pixel. The temperature that it reads is actually coming from a separate sensor. It's this one. And that's just like an IR thermometer. And then it also has one of those little multi-pixel FLIR lepton sensors. And because of that, it's not as useful for making detailed measurements, but for what I need it for is basically, you know, where's the hot spot, how hot is it? It's great. And it's a lot less expensive than the other options, or at least it was when I bought it. It may not be the best option now, but it seemed like a good deal when I got it. Also, Kate, who's often in chat, has actually done some firmware reverse engineering on this one, and in her GitHub, I think you can find, so if you look for KTemkin and TG165, I think you'll find a kit for loading your own firmware modules into this thing. So that could be a fun thing to do on stream, especially. Morgan says, building a project right now, I've sunk about 2 to 4 times the cost of what I plan on selling one on if I'm ever going to sell them. That seems pretty low to me, honestly. I mean, product development, it's very rare that you can develop a product for just about the same cost as what you would actually just sell it for. That's like a lot of why R&D is so expensive, right? And that's definitely impossible if you're charging for your time. But even if you're just talking about materials, then usually it's like several copies of what you're building to work on, plus the cost of low quantity parts, plus the cost of any tooling you might need to build, plus the cost of low quantity circuit boards. So it really adds up. I mean, like when I did the product development for Fade Candy, like I felt like that was pretty inexpensive, but like how much did my first prototype run cost? I think I paid probably a couple $1,000s to get the PCBs and parts and everything for my first run. How much was that? That was like 100 boards. So, and like, you know, I could sell that for, again, a couple $1,000s, but it's not like they're all going to work, and it's not like I'm going to sell all of them right away. And so I ended up like, you know, I ended up selling most of them, but then that kind of segues into the product development of the next thing, and like soon enough, those are actually Rev A boards, and now I'm selling Rev B, and you know, so there are a lot of things that can take time and money away from you when you're developing, and then avoiding those things and saving time and money can then add a lot more complexity into it. So, yeah, engineering is hard. Oh yeah, Joseph says firmware module to stream video out of it somehow upcoming. Yeah, no, that's been a persistent idea, is to add something to this that streams video out. It doesn't have any networking built in, so then that would add the question of, well, like what would you get it out of? There is USB, so you could do a software-only solution that makes this show up as like a USB webcam. That might be really nice. It's got micro SD, which is how you do the firmware updates. And so, I mean, that would be nice. I keep telling everyone how crappy the Wi-Fi is around here, but given how low-res the sensor is, I think maybe I could stand to do that real-time over Wi-Fi reliably enough. So another option is to just stick an ESP8266 in this case and to stream it out that way. But yeah, those are both good options. It is tempting to do a software solution that doesn't require opening the case, although Kate has warned me that I might want to open the case anyway because it's hard to tell if it's actually completely off when you start messing with the software. Oh, that's interesting. JD is asking if I thought about adding an HDMI output to the FLIR cam. I hadn't, because that seems like one of the hardest ways I could get video out of it, but that would be a thing I could do. Honestly, the easiest way to get HDMI out of here would be to use Raspberry Pi GPIOs to sniff the SPI bus between the camera and the main chip. And yeah, every time this comes up, lots of people bring up the fact that there are also a bunch of open source cameras that are based on the same sensor this one uses. The reason I keep coming back to this one is that it's the one that I have, and that's all. There's nothing special about it, it's just the one I have. So, if you're expecting more, it doesn't exist. It's just the one that I bought a while ago, and then I still have it. Okay. This is a little annoying. I think I'm just going to cut these wires right now such that I leave some of the color behind and I can see which one went where. It looks like someone in Twitch chat is trying to start a religion around functional programming, and I guess that seems neither here nor there. Yeah, these are not so good. Let's replace it. It'd be cool to have an LED strip here just to like double check all the polarities. Oh, the other thing that's actually helpful, so this is actually labeled on the back with all the pin names, but of course we don't have easy access to the back. Thankfully I have a spare board here. This is actually one that we blew up. This chip is very dead. It is shorting to ground basically, but this board is now a demo model. This part is also functional, so the board isn't entirely trash. You could still use it as a programmer if you disabled this power supply. That's pretty. Isn't all programming dysfunctional? I'd love to be proven wrong, but as far as I can tell... Okay. So yeah, those are 5 volts and ground. It looks like I did actually design this so black is ground. Yeah, and 5 volts is blue, because that doesn't make sense, it's just on the other side. Let's fix this focus. Yeah, the via pattern on the back of that board was really nice. It kind of looked like a red forest. Yeah, it's nice to find beauty in boards that are not like $50,000 too. These are $20 at DigiKey. I'm just ripping off the heat shrink somehow. Time to bring out a scalpel, clearly. Actually, a little knife would actually help with this. Yeah, I just have the one drawer to rummage through that has all the tweezers and knives and screwdrivers and pencils and lighters, and yeah, I should separate those. See, this is easier if you just do it right the first time and don't have to redo any of the connections. Oh, Tuco did such a jump. Can I see him? Why can't I scroll? Oh, because I was in halted mode. Can I even see him? Oh, just barely. Oh yeah, good question about the LEDs. Yeah, they're APA 102s. They have full SPI, yeah. It's taking the old crusty bit of wire off of there. Oh, now there are other drawers like this one. This is just the one that's within reach from my filming desk. It would make me feel better to have a piece of LED strip with the right polarity attached here so I have a reference for the pinout. And in fact, that might be a good order to do this in. So I have one fully assembled bit of LED strip, which is actually, mounted to the case. I have bare LED strips which need wiring. So maybe what we do is we fix the attachment point for the LED strip, then wire up the other case LED strips, use this to test those, and then we'll have that out of the way. And then we can do the rest of the wiring on the individual winch boards. That is our happy winch. Yep. So these both have the same pinout, so we can actually use just one of these if we want. The idea is that the signal comes in this side, and this provides power and data and clock in, daisy chains through these, and the power is just spliced down here, but data and clock daisy chains from up here back down out this wire. Let's put that aside, and this one, so let's just verify this from multiple sources. So here, this left one should be ground. Here. Yep, ground on there too. Great. I think that's pretty safe to say that that's ground. I really don't want to fry my LEDs and have to redo that part. Now I'm again low on the good heat shrink. I'm just going to do the thing right. I already tinned that end a little bit. I'm going to have a little solder and flux on the other end, and then just stick the two together. Trying to do it quickly so I don't pre-shrink the heat shrink too much. That sounded like Tuco jumping. Yeah, camera tracked him even. Alright, there's our ground. Other end can be 5 volts. Can use our nice little hand slicing knife to carve this up. Yeah, I don't know, just coming back to our conversation earlier, I mean, I think part of the reason I like having the opportunity to do a big complicated project like this out in the open is that it is one of those things where, you know, it feels very natural and obvious that things are this complicated from the inside, but a lot of times that knowledge gets stuck in these kind of small groups of people, like the people at the company or the people who do this kind of work a lot, or and so it's nice to just be able to show more of the behind the scenes. And I know this is a little bit contrived because this is like very prototypey. This is not quite the same as if I was designing it for volume manufacture, but a lot of the same engineering questions and depth of design still comes into play. And by taking apart stuff like the video codec and other, you know, really high-end products and low-end products, I think it's nice to see what design decisions must have come into play there. You know, I've got some experience building stuff in a, you know, a more volume manufacturer kind of setting, but not as much as just the people out there. Like, they have all this stuff we can take apart. Maybe if we're lucky, we can even talk to some of them. Oh, thanks. Morgan says the winches are looking really neat. Yeah, I think so too. I'm hoping this works out. There's still a chance that maybe it's just terrible and the whole project is doomed, but I think it's looking all right. I was worried when I first started the winch, or not the winch, but the gimbal computer vision tracking in closed loop mode, because Tuco seemed a little bit weirded out by it. But I think maybe that was just me being kind of sensitive to it, and then Tuco was picking that up, because that didn't last very long. And he doesn't seem to care about the flyer anymore. Maybe we'll see if that changes again once it starts moving around. There we go. Stubborn little piece of heat shrink. Leaving all this conductive debris on my boards and non-conductive debris in my gears. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Kate brings up another important point where there's this kind of mythology almost in engineering that things, if you're a real engineer, this should be easy or whatever, and that's pretty much entirely bullshit. I mean, it's not really how things work. I mean, there are certainly things that you can get really good at and then have experience in, but that doesn't mean it was easier for you. It just means you've done it a bunch already. And if you're just consistently doing new things, it's going to be hard no matter who you are. Yeah, I think a lot of people mistake familiarity with actually it being easy. Which isn't to say that it doesn't get easier as you do it, but that doesn't mean the problem is easier. That just means that, you've been there before. You can recognize how to get from point A to point B. You know when not to give up. You know when to try something different. I feel like so much of how experience ends up saving you time is just like better perception roles. Like you'll notice the right things sooner. You'll still have to read a bunch of documentation to figure out how to put it all together. So I'm hoping I can do as much of the wiring assembly before putting this board in as possible, because that'll be easier, as you might have imagined. This is plus 5 volts for the LEDs. The Winch does not have very many LEDs, so it just uses the same DC-DC converter for the micro and for the LEDs. But the LEDs are pretty power hungry, and you can easily end up in a situation where you do want them to have a separate current limited power supply, which is what we featured on the flyer. The flyer has 4 separate DC converters. It's tempting to shrink those. We could shrink them now, but we can also avoid shrinking them until after testing, that could save us some frustration, so let's do that. Yeah, and there's also some good comments about gatekeeping, like, yeah, Morgan saying there are people who gatekeep heavily and go, it's hard if you aren't smart, and then imply that, especially with women engineers, that, folks aren't smart enough. And yeah, no, what that usually means is that the person who's saying it's easy they've just like forgotten how to actually do it, and they're just acting as the gatekeeper anyway, kind of using that experience, but not necessarily, there's not necessarily anything real behind that. There often isn't. And even if there is, it doesn't matter. Like, the amount of stuff that you've done doesn't matter if you're a jerk to people. It certainly doesn't matter if you're, like, actively discouraging people from getting into your field. You're not helping anyone if that's how you operate. Alright, these next two, I don't know what the order is. I'm just going to have to refer to the LEDs themselves and to the GPIOs. Oh, actually, I guess the colors here would tell us. We do still have the colors. We were using that to cheat. So green is the one that's right next to ground in this color scheme. So this would be green. I was going under the support bar because I wanted to keep the wiring from crossing over there, but this connection actually ends up kind of filling in the same space as like this bundle of wire, for example. So it also seems reasonable for this to just come up like there. So I might do it that way and not run it under. I know I was just talking about green, but red is close by, so maybe let's do that. That is this wire. Let's just ask some tape to help us out. It's never a sure thing with tape. You ask, and then it usually helps. We just lost a piece. I think that fell all the way through. Nope. Now it did. It's also, these things are very hefty for being built almost entirely out of 3D printed parts. I mean, that's the other thing that is an impediment to mass production, obviously, is this being so 3D printed. And a lot of this was me more designing with an eye specifically toward 3D printing than making a prototype of something that might be injection molded later, like you would more do for a real product. And I think that's because my intended audience is actually less like, you know, injection molding and more like people who are making these at hackerspaces. But if you were trying to do this with injection molding, it would look a lot different. I mean, the whole thing wouldn't necessarily need to look a lot different, but the individual pieces would have certainly some different features to them. The CAD model basically needs a redesign anytime. Like, if this is getting another revision, I don't think it makes sense to start with the same Fusion 360 file. It's kind of a mess, and I didn't really know what I was doing when I was starting. Looks like 4th from the right. I should verify that pin number. Verify all the pins. PD3. PD3, that's the clock. Great. Between the movie recorder and hair cam. I'm not going to get any footage of this joint, but that's fine. That seems fine. A little pull test. Looks fine from the side, too. And the green wire. I still have not done any LED animation programming for the flyer, but the winches have some LEDs at least, or some animation programming. All the work to be done on the flyer side is in the Rust code. I mean, I guess that statement applies pretty generally too, but I guess I was talking about specifically about the LEDs, but there's maybe a little bit of mechanical work to do on the flyer for the shell and for aiming the IR sensors, but it's mostly code. So right now the flyer is just like all electronics down the center, and I designed it so that you could put a cylindrical, like plastic or paper or like vinyl or whatever, some kind of thin material shell there. Oh no, I'm going to sneeze. Of course, by saying so, I'm no longer going to sneeze. Okay. Let's test that with the LEDs we already have assembled. And then let's make some more LED assemblies. So much networking happening. Not the bad kind of networking, the computer kind. I know the other kind of networking isn't bad, it's just not the kind I like. Oh, amateur radio. Oh yeah, GPA is super weird. I've only ever had people ask me my GPA when it would later become clear that I didn't want to work for them anyway. I might have told the story before, but there was like a college career fair, which I think somebody told me I should go to, and so I tried it out, and there wasn't anything interesting. There were like some printer and storage companies, because that was what was close by. A lot of shady aerospace companies, and there was IBM, and I remember giving them my resume. I don't even remember what was on this resume. I was just like a college student. It had like a little stuff of my classes, but it was mostly my own fascinations and like stuff that I liked working on. And I remember giving this resume to somebody from the IBM, like the IBM recruiter there, and they just looked at the GPA and then handed it right back to me. And yeah, I remember being slightly shocked at that, but also it didn't take me too long to realize that would have just been terrible anyway. Speaking of terrible, yeah, this connector is pretty bad. These just don't really latch. What makes an aerospace company shady? I don't know, producing like death machines and stuff, maybe spying on people. I don't know, there's a lot of that stuff going around. Alright, I'm gonna just plug in the AC power and see if this works. Maybe I plug this in and then plug the other end. Alright. Oh yeah, that looks right. That's the winch complaining that it's out of force limit. Is that not fine? Oh, maybe that alarm doesn't go away until I actually move the winch. Where did I put the remote? Huh. Let's check the software. I'm not quite sure what state this thing sits in. Oh. It was in manual winch for the wrong winch. I thought I had some lights that would actually show which winch was being controlled, but I'm also in some other kind of error condition. Oh, I'm not getting good data from the force sensor right now. I think something might have come loose there. Just when I was talking about how those wires were probably fine. Let me show you what the sensors are doing. So, we have position feedback, which we can just change by spinning this. There's the velocity, which is the derivative of that. But force feedback, that number is not at all correct. So let's check the connectors. The LEDs are fine though. Might be a little hard to tell what they're doing, but they're sort of flashing between pink and orange. Because the force sensor is really unhappy right now. That's why. Unplug. It's a little cluttered in here. Okay, this bundle of wires is for the position sensor, which is working. This bundle of wires is for the force sensor, which isn't. I'm just going to reseat. Oh, that's really nice and tight, though. What about these? These wires are really bad, though. They have very little copper. No, they have no copper. They have very little metal in them. Yeah. Let's see if that helps. I might just need to replace that wiring, though, because it is very bad. It was kind of suspicious, and if I'm having any problems with it at all, it's probably time to just replace it. Contact. No. Well, we could use the multimeter to try to find the problem. The LEDs are just in the way right now, so I'm going to unplug these. We can test them in a bit. Probably safe to heat shrink the LEDs now. Happy little Winch. It's good to unplug this end of the AC cable when you're working on it. You never know where the other end is, even if I can see it unplugged on the floor. So, just for a quick tour of how this part works. On this side of the bot, there's a pulley. There's a load cell which has these very tiny resistors bonded to the metal. And the very tiny resistors change in resistance very slightly. And this chip amplifies that and gives us a digital interface. It's the HX711. So, let's see, can I even get to all those signals to probe them? This network cable's also in the way. I'm gonna have to cut at least some of these zip ties. This very melty looking 3-3 wire is a part of that force sensor contraption. Where is its ground? Its ground is way up here. And then the data is next to the LED data. I should replace all the shady wiring, because all of these connectors are really bad. And I should use this as a prototype for how I'd like to wire the other winches. And ideally, I would not actually have anything hardwired to the board. I have been so far, because when I put this together, I didn't have a good set of connectors around. And it's not the worst solution for like the power and motor board, because that doesn't really need to disconnect. So hardwiring the power and motor board might be a good idea. But the sensors, I would really like them to be disconnectable, because that's necessary if I'm going to disassemble the two halves of the winch, whereas the power and motor board and this stay together. So I've also got these little inline resistors. These are actually pull-up resistors in the cable harness for the optos. So this is the position sensor. It's an optical encoder. Oh, yeah. Yeah, education it's like super hard to have a good impact. Like, that's like one of the main things I feel like I'm getting discouraged by is how, you know, it's like the young idealized me wanted to change blah 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 from, you know, blah 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 position and whatever. And then you discover that like so much of what you can do is just based on the position you're in, and like, well, all the people who have that particular desire are already either trying the best they can or they have reasons not to try. Yeah. I don't know. I try not to get too down on things though, because there are ways people can change, and it seems, or like there are ways individuals can have a positive change, even if you can't have every possible change you want. You just sometimes end up having an effect you didn't really expect, but maybe it's still good. Oh man, I had a relationship that, with all sorts of recurring arguments, that were basically the same question, but like applied to what each of us were trying to do. Cutting through heat shrink is oddly satisfying. Oh, why is it so stiff in here? There's just a lot more heat shrink going on. Oh, I used these. Oh, those things. Right, I've got a couple of these weird little solder seal things, which are actually heat shrink with a little bead of solder built in. they're interesting little things. They're hard to really use that effectively, and I think I might have ended up with some bad joints because of it. It is fun to cut through most things, I guess, as Chris points out. And yeah, it would be nice having, you know, even just like one custom PCB in this project would give you a place to like do all the wiring mess. And I certainly could have made a custom PCB, like certainly I have ways of doing that, but I didn't really want to spend the space on that. I didn't really want to replace any of these with fully custom PCBs for this level of the prototype. I'm just going to take this all off. This wire is really bad. Not gonna burn. Some of this stuff was actually iron, so it was like sparking when I took a lighter to it. This stuff might be copper, actually. Maybe it's just really thin copper or aluminum. But this is not the iron stuff. I did have some that was iron. Ugh. This has a bit of extra slack to make it easier to disassemble the two halves. I like to preserve some of that at least. It's tempting to combine these two, actually. Any connector I put on this will not fit through the whole plastic assembly, so I'm basically locking the end of this connector at least into the top two pieces here, which is fine. So it will, like, I can take off the bottom half, but it'll be stuck to the top, and I think that's fine. I think that's the state I'm aiming for at the moment. And I think I can share power. I think these both work at 3v3. Did I take notes on that part? I don't think I wrote down any of the power connections because I think, like, it's, well, no, they both have to be 3.3 volt because, like, there are no level shifters and that's what the logic is coming out as. There is a regulator on board the HX711, but I think it's like lower voltage than 3v3, and I think it's like a very low current, very stable regulator just for the resistor bridge. So if I'm going to have one connector for both of these, I just need 4 data total, and then power and ground. So I can use one of my 6-pin connectors. I've got a couple of those, maybe. I don't know if I have enough to use a 6-pin for each of the winches, though. So that might be a reason to do something different. Here's one 6-pin harness. I could buy more 6-pin, but I don't know. I've got a bunch of spare 2, got a bunch of spare 4, I've got one spare 6. I used more of these than I expected for the flyer. Yeah, let's try this. I'm gonna have to label this one as LEDs, probably. Oh, here's Stuco. Oh, has the camera still not spotted him? I thought it was tracking him. This would actually be an alright case for the other kind of connector, wouldn't it? Oh, here's my label maker at least. I guess I didn't need a second one of these for the other end because like the LEDs on the case are kind of obvious, but I'll keep this for the other winches. Oh yeah, label maker with a serial interface would be great. I like this label maker a lot, but I don't think it has a built-in serial or USB. Might be an interesting little hacking project. This is the BMP21. I already made this thing. It's a 3D printed bracket that hangs it on shelves. Can we focus? Maybe we can't. Yeah, so this hangs on those wire shelves I have here. And it actually bolts onto the back. There were some holes there for accessories, I guess. Let's just print 2 more of these. And then HX711, I guess, is the shorthand for this. Force is another small word I could use, but HX711 seems more specific. These labels are maybe a little too large. I would like to keep ground on the same side if I can, just as a convention. I think if I had the tab on the left, I think ground is on the bottom. Yeah. That makes this one ground, which I think is also pin 1. Let's double check. Yeah, great. This ribbon cable wire is super delicate. Oh, good question from Afro Ninja Deluxe on YouTube chat who asks, where's Tuco? Tuco, actually you can see him. He's on the chair in that frame. Let me aim a little more directly. I guess when I constantly want to aim a little more directly, it means I need to have the camera keep him closer to the center of the frame, which I can actually do programmatically. Pitch gain region 0. Oh, actually, he is near the center of the frame. It's just that that shot is cropped kind of weirdly. The yaw axis, though. How's that? Something like that. Bot. So, I'm gonna try, yeah, one of these wires is way thicker than the other, which might make the splice a little bit weird. I'm gonna try to just make a little hook in the thicker wire, and then lay the thinner wire in that hook. Yeah, let's just do a few more of those. This wire might end up being way too long, but I think there's room for some extra wire in the bottom of the winch. We are not very servo AF today, unfortunately. Maybe I need a photography robot for this camera too. would have been slightly easier to put this on before making those hooks. Clearly those hooks are not squished enough. Did I just get really lucky the first time? I knew these sections of heat shrink are kind of long. I guess I was hoping it would support the ribbon cable, but I don't know if it actually helps that much. It just pushes the strain relief problem down the road a bit. I'll probably use smaller ones next time. It's a weird culture we have now where people like handmade things, but if you make things by hand, you're a sucker. Because clearly that's a machine's job. Oh, I just glanced at chat briefly, but are we talking about student debt now? Oh, man. Yeah. I didn't have the hugest possible pile of student debt, but I had a nice little pile of it when I left for California. Yeah, I basically bankrolled the whole trip to California based on the job offer and a small relocation bonus. Like, oh, you have a job offer. Sure, we'll give you a place to live as long as you pay us this much rent. It was weird how competitive it is even getting the ability to pay rent in this area. Well, this isn't the same area. I mean, I guess that was Silicon Valley proper. I was living in Sunnyvale at the time, and then later Mountain View. Whereas this is actually a pretty different area. This does not really feel like Silicon Valley at all. This feels like almost Berkeley and Oakland, but not quite. Emeryville is a weird place. It's the actual city I'm in. very carefully shrinking the ones around the plastic. This Xbox controller is really quick to go to sleep when I'm not touching it, so I've got to train myself to wake it up every time I want to play with the robot. Alright, that was one side of the HX711, the other side goes to the board. Now, once we've got this one working, I think we can just do the other 3 winches assembly line style, which is how we've been doing all the mechanical parts. So instead of just all this switching back and forth between different kinds of jobs, we can just do one job for all 3 winches, then do another job for all 3 winches, and that saves a lot of time. But yeah, I wasn't expecting to have to replace this right away, but I guess it's good that we're doing it now instead of at some random time in the future. At least the software handled it fine. It was not getting a good reading from the force sensor, and so it was just going into halt mode. And you should see the same result in several different failure modes that I anticipated, where like it's giving you a value that's way out of range, or the serial bus is not giving you correct packets, or it's just failing to poll frequently enough, for example. Oh yeah. Yeah, having better systems to allow more people like free access to university seems really, really good. I'm all for that. Like, all the reasons we have not to do that are so dumb. And basically boil down to, I got mine, screw you. Oh yeah, 20,000 pounds debt. Yeah, that... I think mine wasn't quite that bad. It was like, I managed to like get some scholarships, and I had a job for part of it, and had some help from my parents. And so I think the actual amount of money I owed when I left was like, it was somewhere between, it was somewhere around $20,000, I think. It's like 18 to 25 in that range. And I was trying to pay it off as soon as I could, because like all of a sudden I had this job in Silicon Valley, and what else are you gonna do? Pay off your student loans, pay rent. Alright, so this is ground on this side. Yeah. So there are a bunch of options. The ground we ended up picking is up here in the top left corner. Just to verify, yes, that is a real ground. We didn't just make that up in a desperate attempt to find grounding. That corner has a lot of hardwired stuff in it now, which is nice. That is not the right soldering iron. It was not cold, or it was not warm, and it was not the right size. So unfortunately I can't stream amazingly long today because I have some errands I need to do this afternoon. And then I've actually got a social thing I'm doing in the evening. I have trouble with social things. Like, sometimes they're really good, but they're also just generally, even when they're good, they're pretty difficult. So this one's going to be kind of an unknown. It'll be some familiar people and some unfamiliar people, and like being invited to dinner, and it'll probably be fine. But it's also relatively early dinner, which is not usually my style. So I've got to get all my usual stuff done before then. So I had some errands I need to do after, or before that, but after this. I don't have to explain my entire day to you, I realize this, but I like streaming and I like to be able to do more of this, and so this is me being sad that I have other obligations that I have to attend to soon. Oh wow, Norway has free higher education? That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, man. So, the country I live in is really, really bad. It's just not a good country. And I mean, I know that most countries have their problems, but it just seems like the stuff the US values is just completely backwards. It's just so much about corruption and capitalism and not about actually using government to help people. And so you've got this one faction of people who's all about, like, government just shouldn't do anything, but then they actually take actions that cause it to benefit only the people who are really powerful. And then you've got the people who are like, hey, maybe government should help out some regular folks. And then that's been like a crazy idea lately. But I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, not that there's much you can trust the government to do, but like some things seem like kind of a no-brainer. Like just paying for healthcare. It's not like the government is providing the doctors. You've already got doctors who are good at that. They just need a system that isn't so hostile to them like what we have now. That's ground, and then I kind of forgot what all the other wires were. Let's look them up. So VCC is opposite from ground, which is nice, because that's the same as the LEDs. Data is next to ground, clock is next to VCC. I think this red one here is our other 3.3 volts. Trying to figure out which wires I want this to be above and below. I think I want this to route through here. Some of these are going away anyway, but money is super weird, and capitalism and like worshipping money just doesn't seem to lead to good things. And it's this weird thing, because like not having money can lead people to be just like really desperate, and you can just have no energy to actually respect the people around you if you have no resources. But then some of the meanest people I know are also some of the wealthiest. I mean, I also know really wealthy people who are actually super nice, but I guess one thing I realized was some of the people I know who have just been the worst to me overall, like people who I thought were my friends who then just like turned out to be total backstabbing jerks. They were people who had like rich parents, which isn't to say that that's always going to mean that you're a jerk, but it does seem to be not an asset, but something that people end up having to work against. And some of those people were really well-intentioned. They just didn't like understand the effects of their actions. I don't know, that's super off topic, sorry. Hey, how about winches? It's a slightly ugly joint, but it's better than what we had before for sure. Yeah, not dying is a great goal. Yeah, which is super difficult sometimes with this country's medical system if you happen to live here. I know we're talking about winches, but yeah, not dying is useful when you're trying to make winches. Ground. Ow. My little coffee side table is also good for mouse. That's a nice revelation. This is next. DT is next to ground. Goes to D2.7/PQ3, which is up there somewhere. Oh no, up there. PQ3. That is this blue wire. Cool. That blue wire that no one can see. That's 4th from the right on the top. This one does need to go under that bar for sure. And I didn't tin this one yet. Yay. One more to go on this, and then we can test the force sensor. And then go back to testing LEDs. Yak stack. Alright, that would make this one its partner down here. 4th from the right on the bottom. Here I am, always dropping the solder before I'm actually done with it. There we go. It does not have to be precision solder work on these connections. It's kind of nice to have some of that. Okay, again, before doing the heat shrink, let's just try out the sensor, see if this works. Get all the conductive debris away from the work area. This wire is a little bit more messy than it was before, but at least we've got room to work on it. So Ethernet. And power coated in this crinkly stuff so Chico doesn't bite it. Let's plug this in, and then I'll switch to the telemetry. No explosions. That looks better. Yeah. Much better when the cable is not falling apart. So, remote is way over here. Remote is asleep. Let's wake up the remote. So it's tempting to go ahead and replace the position sensor, even though it's not having a problem right now, and I did already take the heat shrink off of it. Since I think just all of those connectors I was using before were bad, and I just need something better. Oh, nice. SFMC says, I missed the initial design / construction of the first winches, but I think they might be one of my favorite parts of this project. Nice, simple, reliable, one-dimensional actuators working together. That is certainly the goal. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly things about the winches that I could improve to make them more reliable and faster and whatever, but I'm really happy with how they are right now. Like, they are filling my original design goals pretty well so far, and I think we're on track to having a pretty nice, smooth camera system. I think the biggest thing about the overall design that I might be changing if I did another revision of the winches is to actually have two motors. So one motor that just takes up the cord, and one motor that actually does the drive. And so I think what I would do is have two motors, each with their own encoder, one on the capstan. So the capstan, oh yeah. I was wondering if the control loop would react to that, but I think it's halted, so it wouldn't. It would be easier to actually demo that if there was a load on here, because as it is, without a weight on the winch, it's hard to keep it manually in its green zone there. Yeah, so many streams. Well, I've been trying to stream a lot lately since it seems like it's one of those things where it's not really actually that hard for me to do it. It's more just I need to keep in the right headspace to be continuously sharing this stuff. And then some stuff is easier to stream than others. Lately there's been a good mix of stuff that is easy to stream. If I spend more time editing, I might try to see if I can stream some of the editing work, because I'll need to do some of that soon. I haven't decided what to do with that. I might stream the editing actually from my other desk, so it would look completely different, and I might have different OBS layouts. So, yeah, let's plug in the LEDs. Let's not hot plug them, because I don't think they'd like that. Let's plug in the LEDs, make sure the LEDs work, and then I think we're just making more LEDs, and then using this winch as a template to finish building the other three. So, LEDs. These are still attached to each other. We just need to put these anywhere. There really is no way to put them not in the way, I guess. They're just gonna hang out right there. And here's the input. It goes over there. And this plugs back in. So as for power consumption, these things idle at like, so right now it's 9 watts. I was gonna say 5 to 10, it kind of depends on the specifics, but sure, 8 or 9 watts seems like about what they idle at with a little bit of lighting. And then they peak at around 80 watts. The power supply is rated for like twice that almost. Yeah, see the color change? So we're, maybe this would be easier to see with the shop light, or with the lights on the desk turned off or down. There we go. And my sleeves are just going to be a safety hazard at this point. Dean says I should get food. Yeah, I should actually get food and do some errands pretty shortly, but maybe we can get one of these LED strips assembled at least. So here's red. Now once we get over that red line, that was the lower, there's like a hard and soft limit. So if it's below that, it'll refuse to move at all. If it's below only one of those lines, then it'll refuse to go any further down, but it'll still go up. But now it's actually fine, and now it's kind of a purple color or something. And if I pulled it even harder and got it above the max limit, then it would turn red again, which is actually kind of hard to do by hand. I have to hold the winch down. And now I'm back driving the motor, because it's, okay. Yeah, the upper limit is a ways up there right now. We don't have to worry about that too much. I think the color changes depending on whether I'm in manual winch mode or whatever. I should really have the mode show up on the top of every page, because right now the mode is only showing up on the bot page. Can we just do that? How many distractions can we have? No, I'm not gonna worry about that right now, because I feel like I'd fuss with the CSS for like an hour. But that's halted mode. So with some load, we have halted is red, manual flyer is kind of bluish white, and then we have manual winch. So I think this light blue means that this winch is the one I'm controlling. Then if I toggle this, now it's kind of this more like grayish green kind of color. So I'm like toggling between all the winches. So once we have all the winches attached, you'll see this moving around the room. And then once this is selected, then I can actually run it. Yeah, and check out the lights. Oh. I actually felt that happen. I got the paracord actually got a little bit off of that last pulley, which was totally my fault. I was not guiding it correctly. That is also one of the weak points, is that last pulley could use some additional rollers to help it guide. I think it's going to be fine because this winch will be pointed pretty much directly at a ceiling pulley, which will be doing that job. But if you wanted to use this in more spaces, why is it not moving now? Am I just on the edge here? It's getting hard to do that one-handed. Huh. Oh, the controller went to sleep. You know, I think this controller's low on batteries. I'm gonna replace those. Whoa. Why? Like, these are super stuck in there. Unexpected problem. Removing batteries from controller. Can I use the button? Okay, I've got to like grab these with the pliers. These controllers do actually report their battery status. So, like, I'm using it via DirectX right now, and you get battery status packets from the controller, which is kind of nice. I'm just not doing anything with that yet. Oh, that was the gimbal. It would help if I used the right joystick. Yeah, so, I mean, this might be a little more interesting if you haven't seen it from the graphs here. Winch, right, that's what we're doing. Oh yeah, there is a rechargeable battery pack you can get for these controllers, but I like AA's because I have a big AA recharging station. Oh yeah, this one's kind of interesting too if you haven't seen it. You know, this is useful for tuning the winches. We've been here a bit in the past, but it's been a while. Oh, haha. Andrew Gillard says that other people have this problem too with the nickel metal hydride AA's being thicker enough that they get stuck in the Xbox controller. Yep. Those were definitely nickel metal hydride. Okay. Well, I could do the thing I just said where I try to build another LED strip, or I could wrap this up and do errands. How late is it? Let's prepare a little bit of LED strip. I don't know if I'll have time to install it though. Oh, you know what? It's not just the LED strip though. I also wanted to replace the connector for this position sensor. I guess I can have the resistors be in the wiring harness still. Yeah, this part isn't the greatest. Oh, that's a great question. Some user asks how expensive the stuff is in the winch. It seems smooth, powerful, and fast. Yeah, I haven't actually added it all up, so I can't give you an easy number, but they're actually designed to be pretty cheap. And, I I mean, the whole system will probably still set you back a couple $100 or a few $100, but the most expensive pieces in here are the encoder is like $15, but I think the motor is the most expensive part. I think the motor is like $35. The microcontroller is like $20. Power supply is like another 20 or 30, I think. I obviously don't have a good number off the top of my head, but that's like kind of the order of magnitude we're dealing with. And then it's like maybe $10 or $20 worth of like bolts and nuts and 3D printed plastic. Or well, it's probably more like $10 or $20 worth of hardware, and then another like 20 or 30 in plastic. It's probably got like a spool or two of plastic in here. We could weigh it, but I mean, most of the weight right now is coming from the motor. Yeah, most of that's the motor. The motor's pretty central though. The force sensor and the amplifier were like another $6 or $7. Oh yeah, and the microcontroller board, yeah, it's a TI Tiva C. It's one of these. These are $20 on DigiKey. Yeah, so it's designed to fit their booster packs and for breadboarding. This is a programming interface. It's actually a smaller chip from the same family, but this is the one you're mainly working on. So it's an ARM Cortex M4 at 150 megahertz with built-in 100 base T Ethernet. Oh yeah, and another good question. The winch looks 3D printed. Is it open source? Yes, and then Kate already responded with the link. But yeah, all the CAD files are up there. And I've been trying to make it, you know, as easy to keep hacking on and repurpose as possible. I haven't managed to keep the Fusion 360 files especially clean, so it's like a mix of Fusion 360 and Rhino at this point. But I have step files, and I think IGES files for all the assemblies, and then STL files for all the printable parts. And then like whatever else I have from the tools I use to make them. Oh yeah, the Steam controller is pretty nice actually. I really like the Steam controller. It uses AA's. I don't know why people are so into LiPos and controllers, because I don't like having to wait for controllers to charge. I love just slapping in a new set of batteries. So I don't quite get what the appeal would be of having built-in LiPos. I never liked that about the PlayStation controllers, because it felt like I was always waiting for them to charge before I could play. Oh nice, RC glider launch winch. How fast do they need to be for that? Because I didn't design this with tons of speed in mind, but it might be able to go fast if you change the gearing. The motor I bought has a gearbox built in, and you can actually buy those in the same form factor with different gear ratios. And then there's an additional 1 to 2 gearing from this gear right there. Mako MK had a comment on YouTube chat about the government being like, he said, or they said, I think fundamentally people don't share your belief government wouldn't be hostile to doctors. Did I say that? Because I don't think that's something I'm like sure of or anything. I just feel like a system that, you know, puts more resources aside for individual health care than this current thing that we have in the US, which is completely a joke, would, like, I guess my point is, like, sure, there's all sorts of things that could go wrong. There's all sorts of models that could just fail in all sorts of ways. But the thing we're doing right now is very, very, very not working. And so Yeah, no, I mean, like, obviously it's a complicated problem, and you need to look at models of where things have worked and where things haven't, but just generally having some model where there is basically a, I mean, like the single pair system everybody's talking about, or, you know, there's different ways to implement it, but it feels like this country isn't even trying. So, and sure, like a lot of people here are, but the people in power certainly aren't. I mean, they're trying to do something completely different. And I don't expect that to change. Like, the people in power are always going to be abusing that power. But it's like, how do we set up a system that can work despite that? Also, not to say we should give up on caring about abuses of power. It's just that, you know, defense in depth, right? I'm cutting the encoder wires because I like making pain for myself. How much of the rest of this do I need to take apart? So these exposed wires here are 3.3 volts, and then in these junctions are the data. Yeah, also Andrew points out that, like, if you look at the data about how expensive the US healthcare system is versus, like, every other country, it's completely an anomaly. So, I mean, it just seems like there are many, many other ways of doing less badly than the US currently is. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't have to go bankrupt to survive. You shouldn't have to die because you didn't have health insurance. And yeah, I mean, there's a gap between the amount of help people need and the amount of help we're all prepared to offer, of course, but right now we're not even close to reaching that potential. I think I'm just gonna have to completely redo this part. Well, let's start with the easy wire. Ground is easy because nothing else is connected to it. Okay, more labels, I think, actually. There it is. Encoder, quadrature, quad. Like, I need a short word to go in this label. Encoder might fit in a smaller font. Of course, with that hook I built to mount the label maker anywhere on my shelving, it also means I can put it on any of these shelves, and then I forget where I left it. Oh yeah, speaking of other health systems, yeah, Andrew was saying that NHS has a history of being good, but then like yeah, a lot of people I've heard about, because I hear about a lot of people's transition drama, and NHS is apparently really infuriating for that. So if you're trans and trying to get trans healthcare, maybe it's not so good. If you break your leg, maybe it's all right. I don't know. I'm kind of using the same polarity for all of these, where the sticky outy pins in the box are for the peripheral, and the receptacles here without the box are for the board, which seems to make things slightly less easy to short out when stuff is not connected, but it is powered. And then I've additionally been using the bottom one when you hold it in this position as a ground. Which I will continue. So that's ground. And yet another of the very few remaining grounds. Gotta check it's a real ground. I'm not just hallucinating power rails here. Yeah, so top left on the right connector. Okay. Oh, how did we get from trans healthcare to surgery? That's usually not even the thing people are talking about. It's usually like, I just need to talk to someone and get started on hormones, and it's taken years. And that's like what you hear about. And that's so annoying, because it's like, I don't know, not to get into like inside baseball with this, but it's just like rare to find a doctor who knows more about it than you can find out just like talking to some people online and doing some research. And so, yeah, it's hard to find a doctor who's actually helpful instead of just trying to set up obstructions. And it often seems so much easier to just buy medication online. I was doing that for a while, and still would if I didn't currently have healthcare that's all right. My current healthcare is thanks to Covered California, which is basically California doing Obamacare before Obamacare. Well, before Covered California was a thing, I was uninsured for a while. I mean, a while ago I had a job that provided insurance, but when I tried to get it on my own, I was not having a lot of luck with that. I mean, basically the way that works is they ask you a bunch of questions, weeks pass, then they send you a letter that's like, nope. And then there's a form you can fill out to ask why the nope. And then weeks pass, and then you get a letter that's like a bunch of bullshit. And it still doesn't really explain it, and it doesn't give you any recourse. And then you try the whole process again with a different insurer. And so I did that 3 times, and then just was uninsured for a couple of years. And so, like, yeah, if I had needed emergency health care, I would have had to pay for it all out of pocket. going to follow the same tradition here of putting ground and power on opposite sides of the connector. This one doesn't really have a natural order since it's coming from a round connector. I can't just follow that order. But yeah, the healthcare thing is super stressful, and it's so different if you have an employer that provides it versus not. Because, you know, when I got my job at a fancy Silicon Valley company right out of college, they gave me the best healthcare. And I didn't even know how good it was because, of course, I was right out of college, didn't know what it was. I had some, well, I guess I had access to my parents' healthcare for a while. And then after graduating, I got this healthcare from VMware, which was great. And then you know, that was great. And then later it's like, oh, I work at a startup and we get like cheap startup healthcare, which is, you know, fine. And then I try to get it on my own and it's like, oh geez, this is really expensive and it doesn't really even cover anything. And because it's like it doesn't really help with any of my like recurring medical expenses. It's pretty much only useful if I have like some kind of major problem, and it's still like $300 something a month, and it's pretty bad. Like, but it's better than just not having it at all, which is the situation I was in before. Because before they were just like no, and that was it. And every insurer I went to gave me like a different bullshit list of reasons they didn't want to cover me. It was great. And like a lot of them were like covertly related to trans stuff, which was also great. Oh, is this my plus 3.3 way down here? Where's my template? Indeed. Way down there. Whoa. So far. Bottom left. Get that sucker tinned. So much changes depending on the scale you're looking at it with. I was watching, I don't know, I watch a lot of random YouTube videos, as you might expect, given that I'm someone who likes making random YouTube videos. And I started watching something from the 8-Bit guy recently, and I don't know, I watched some of his videos. I'm not like a huge fan of his stuff, but some of his stuff is entertaining. And I was watching one of his videos, and he doesn't usually do electronics. And he actually, like, when he does try to do electronics, the results are usually really bad, and he usually just makes a bunch of incorrect assumptions and then complains about not getting the right results, and it's kind of a pain to watch. But he started putting together some kit, and I didn't really get that far into the video, but he was like gonna preemptively tell the commenters, like, okay, I'm not like coming down with like some degenerative disease or something. I'm just like holding the soldering iron in an awkward position, so don't worry about the shaking or whatever. And it just struck me as weird that he would even mention that, because okay, like, why do people care? And then like, oh well, I guess he probably gets a lot of weird comments like that are like, oh, why is it shaking? You know, why can't you just hold something? And then the people don't realize that it's because you're zoomed in and you're looking at something little, and so I mean, I guess that analogy kind of seemed poignant to me, that like shaking being something that can range from being like, oh, this is just totally fine, this is not a problem at all, to like some sign of alarm or whatever, or some sign that you're not succeeding at doing this thing, just depending on the scale and just depending on what goals you have in mind. It's like when you're actually soldering, there's a particular thing that you're trying to do with a particular like error bound, and you're going to brace yourself so that you can do that thing. But then if you're like an internet commenter who has nothing at stake and you're just worried about finding like every minutia that you can like piss on, then just having something that's optically big like that is going to be distracting both for you and the people who take that advice to heart, like I guess the 8-Bit guy does. So that was an interesting experience, and I decided to do something else. I don't know what order to put these other two wires in. it really doesn't matter. I think we should just pick one, and then that'll just be the order that we do all the winches in. There's no constraint setting this at this point. So physically, which one is on the left and which one's on the right? Let's just do it that way. I'm not even going to bother looking up which one is which right now. I'll do that later. I'll just put one on one and the other on the other. They're not quite the ones on the edge. They're like second from the edge and third from the edge on the bottom. Yeah, I was trying to give some advice to some, well, it's not like I was trying to give some advice. I usually don't try to give advice, but someone asked for advice recently and I wasn't really sure what to say, and so I said a bunch of stuff. And they were, I guess, summarizing what I said as, like, don't feed the trolls. And actually, I guess I didn't think of it that way, but that's, yeah, it's usually a good approach, right? It's like a way of giving up power, giving up your control to the people who are trying to get it from you. Happy little wires. I guess, I was thinking of Bob Ross, and like, oh yeah, I guess that was one thing I did watch on Netflix, because I keep forgetting what's worth watching on Netflix and then canceling my subscription. I guess Bob Ross was there. I'm sure you can find him on YouTube, though. I know a lot of people like Stranger Things, but I was having trouble getting into that. Another joint that's not amazing, but will do. I guess I should have tinned both ends of this and that would work out better. Okay. Those are soldered, not amazingly so, but they should do. Maybe this is time to do some heat shrink, because there's actually a bunch of unshrunk heat shrink on this board. How does this even work? SFMC asks, why did you decide to directly solder to the microcontroller board? Well, because what are the other options, right? I mean, just think about what other options are there. I could have a connector that is the whole width of this thing and just plugs in, and then I solder to that connector. And that seemed kind of doable, but I didn't have any of those handy, and it didn't seem good enough to bother with ordering all those parts, and it didn't seem like I would actually be able to do that. It seemed like I would need a board for that. Yeah, I mean, I guess my main question is like, well, what else is there? Like, I don't see a good solution here other than designing a different kind of board. Is this... Oh, this is just way too close. I mean, it would be convenient to have those little 0.1 inch little female receptacles that can go over each of the pins. And I was using those for a while, but I've been replacing those because I don't have any of those that are actually good. All the ones I've been able to find are really, really low quality. And so there's that problem. Crimp DuPont connectors, what do you mean by that? I mean, I'm also not going to be super inclined to, like, oh, just one of these. You just need like a $10,000 tool. But I mean, if it's something that would be useful, I might invest in a new crimper tool. But the answer that's like just use this crimper system is not necessarily something that's viable. TE. Which connectors are you talking about for TE? Yeah, I mean, like, I'm doing the thing that is easiest with the tools I have, is usually the answer to the question, why are you doing it that way? And yeah, no, I'd love other options. The options I know about didn't seem as good as this. Yeah, those... See, I would need like one position. Like I can't use 2 or 3 or whatever. Each wire would need to go to a separate place. So, yeah, like I'm aware of those. I just don't have the tools to crimp them myself, and all of the pre-made ones that I've seen are really bad. So that's the problem with those that I know of. If you have a good source for them, I'd love to hear about it. And this is not bad, right? Like, it's one shrink there, and then I've got connectors. Oh, sorry, that one was off frame. Oh yeah, and the female crimps and then heat shrink over. Yeah, that seems like a thing we could do. Wow, I was getting the weirdest noise. I don't know if you heard that, but that was some vibration in a stand with a bunch of soldering iron tips as the pump in my hot air station rumbled. Yeah, no, I mean, if you want to send me stuff, I do have a PO box. But yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate donations, but I also just appreciate recommendations. Like, if I'm buying something, I'd love to be more informed about what I'm getting. All right, encoder. Alright, ground on the bottom. And then we just have a bunch of other stuff. Ship a complete proprietary system? What do you mean? Oh, you mean like send me something to reverse engineer? I mean, well, sure. Like that's part of the point. I mean, if you send me something, I'll dig into it. Oh wow, MakeMK had another comment about NHS saying the NHS doctors actively work to shut down doctors who don't require waiting lists to get hormones, sadly. Yeah, that's annoying. There's definitely, I mean, there's a little bit of that in the US, but it definitely seems like it's pretty bad with the NHS. The gatekeeping as a service, as an institutional value. It's like, I can't believe this is a medical system that will put, like we get all this Tylenol in opioids that end up hurting people that, you know, just need a higher level of those drugs to get by because there's this epidemic, and then we can't provide over-the-counter these like really, really completely harmless transition hormones. It's pretty weird. Like the level of kind of assumed, you know, authority based on danger or whatever that the government has for different substances is just absolutely nuts. They control stuff that's just completely safe, and yeah, but you know, man, humans do some really depressing stuff. Let's take apart this resistor assembly slightly. Oh yeah, as Dean points out, there's a lot more engineering that we need to go into making TucoFlyer a product rather than just like a project that people can build. Because yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see this and think like, ah, that's so much work. Why would you put that much work into anything? But then like actually, you can make one of those expanding brain memes from it. It's like, little brain is, why would you do that much work? And then the next brain is like, well, no, this much work goes into everything. And then the next brain is like, well, no, actually, this is just a tiny amount of work, and most things have way more than this. And then the largest one is like, none of us will be doing any more work in 100 years because we'll all be dead, or something like that, because it's Twitter. I think that fantasy that somehow effort itself is valuable, like, seems to exist in a lot of places where it's not helping. We have this kind of weird false meritocracy that we value. Some idea of people doing really well at something, but we don't even really know what they're doing or how hard it was for them. So it's all this kind of like weird distant hero worship, and then putting down people who are actually right there in front of you. It's weird how much of nerd culture, at least in my experience, has been like, these abstract people somewhere are really virtuous, but you, specifically the people right around me, are terrible. Like holding up on a pedestal these people who are just doing something that you use, like, oh, you made this patch, or you made like the Linux kernel or something, but then if you meet a lot of those people, they're really hard to work with. It's just a value system, right? I don't actually have to take these resistors off. I could probably leave these here, but it would be nice to add more heat shrink. Anyway, these are 3.3K. I'm also realizing that maybe I should have kept track of which one went where, because there isn't actually an ordering to these. They're just two quadrature outputs, and swapping them changes the direction. So I might actually have to twist these together and check. Check whether I'm getting the right polarity. Yeah, let's actually do a test where we just twist these wires together and just get it working to that extent, and then we can finish building this harness. Oh, Ryan thinks we need a stereo camera so we can fly around with the VR headset. Yeah, that would be fun. I don't know of a stereo camera that would fit on that gimbal. I think the whole flyer would have to be larger for that. But it's a nice idea. I'm going to randomly pick an orientation, and it might be wrong, and it might send the control loop spiraling out into a terrible place. So, 50-50. Let's just leave that with the wires dangling out and then plug it into the wall. That sounds great, right? Oh, let me restart the chat, sorry. Oh. Looks like Yojik on YouTube chat says hello. Hello. I'll wave back. And then Shubham Patel says, I'm just amazed you can work this much on one project. Yeah, sometimes I am too. I mean, I've been doing that kind of thing for a while though. There's something about it that I enjoy, just being able to dig into just one thing really deeply. And I've done that for a long time. Like, my first really deep project was this thing called PicoGUI. It was a embedded graphical user interface that I designed for, you know, basically like before PDAs were, or before smartphones were a thing, you had PDAs, and this was when PDAs were kind of early and they were pretty expensive, and I saved up money for a long time and got like a really low-end Palm Pilot, and I thought it was really cool. And I liked it a lot, but I also wanted to try to bring that to more people. So I was thinking, well, how can I design my own thing that basically uses similar technology as the Palm Pilot, but is then focused on like stuff that I wanted to do at school and that I thought my classmates would like writing documents and like editing stuff. And it was basically like I was trying to make something kind of like OLPC, the One Laptop Per Child project, but like before I knew about that, and like I think way before that was actually happening. And so that was my like aspirational goal, but practically it just turned into building a Linux single board computer based on the 68K, and then designing a bunch of software, and the project kind of turned into this giant GUI system that was just lots of work. It was, I mean, it was a project that I was working on mostly myself with occasional internet contributors, and I think the code base was something around 150,000 lines. And it was just a software project, right? It wasn't also hardware, but it was like client and server GUI stuff. It was widgets. It was graphics drivers. It was font rendering. It was applications. It was like, I even started writing a web browser for that project. And I wrote a terminal emulator. I did some contract jobs relating to porting stuff to it. It was pretty intense. I worked on that for years. Oh yeah, Azir points out, the website is still online. It's like Still paying DreamHost a couple bucks to host a bunch of that. Alright, it is idling at 11 watts, 10 watts. Actually, I don't see the lights coming on. I wonder if there's some firmware bug that shows up if the Ethernet isn't plugged in on startup. I don't know. I'm seeing it draw 11 watts, but I don't see the lights on the board come on. I mean, I do have black tape over the lights, but you can still see them a little bit. I just wanted to decrease the brightness. What am I doing wrong here? So the encoder ground is soldered. All of these are soldered. These are twisted. Let's check some voltages. Yeah, I mean, there could be a short on 3.3 volt, maybe. Anyway, I'm just gonna get the meter over here. I was just getting distracted by the camera and needing to get this formatted. Oh yeah, I'm with Kate, who says, I just try not to create websites for things now. I mean, I'll create a website if it's something that I need to, like, there's a good reason for that, but yeah, it's so much headache to maintain stuff like that. I still have, I mean, scanlime.org still runs on WordPress, which is still kind of annoying. I try to make it as much static as possible, but it's still WordPress. But then when I did misc.name, I did that on Squarespace, which is more expensive than just throwing yet another thing on my already overloaded DreamHost account, but it does work really nicely. The 24 volt light's coming on. Let's see if we get, I could just start checking power rails. I'm first gonna unplug this encoder connector. Well, I might as well unplug the HX711 also. Just unplug all the things. Oh. Yeah, I think one of those might be shorted, because now we're down to 6.5 watts, and the lights are on again. Well, one of the lights. We're not getting a link light. Why are we not getting a link light? Maybe we're getting hung in initialization somewhere without the HX711 plugged in. Okay, plugging in the HX711, I guess. Oh, now I've got a link light. Can I verify that I have data on the website? I do have force feedback. Negative. Negative 7 pounds. This part of it is basically digital scale. And that's disconnected. Okay, well that confirms that the thing I was just working on is shorted, which is cool, but I'm not quite sure why. I'm just going to take off the power wire on the encoder and unplug this first because I don't want to plug this in live. And now I'm plugging the encoder back in but without the power wire. So we should have just ground and then the data, which is just kind of going nowhere because it's pull downs. We don't have anywhere to pull it down from. Okay, we got link light. Link light, 6.7 watts. Force data. Okay. Did I somehow short this thing out while I was taking apart the wiring harness? Let's measure the voltage on this connector. Oh man, I've probably got to go soon. I'm running out of time to do the stuff I need to do this afternoon. Actually, it isn't even that much stuff. I just don't want to leave it to the last minute. I just need to do some shopping before this social obligation later. Where is the convenient ground? Is it under here? What? How is that negative? Oh. Because it's just wired backwards, obviously. Yeah, no, I wonder if I'm dyslexic. Wow, you're just watching me make all the mistakes today. Well, we got lucky that I didn't break anything. I'm assuming the encoder's probably fine. It's possible the encoder's broken, but... Yeah, no, I just totally did that wrong. This one is ground, not that one. This is why I check these things like 3 or 4 times, but I still get them wrong, even when I double check them. I've also still got a couple... There are a couple of heat shrinks I missed over here. Let me hit those too. There's something about hosting in the chat and hosting things at home. I used to host things at home all the time. Like even when I had a modem, I would run my own little web servers. I mean, the 2 main downsides to that is that people can DOS you and people can find security vulnerabilities. I'm not worried about that so much right now because I've got symmetric gigabit and none of the incoming ports are open. But, you know, if that's not your situation, maybe there's other reasons to worry. Yeah, the gigabit we have here is really great. It's inexpensive and it's fast, and it's like one of my favorite features of this building. And I didn't even know it was available when I first moved here, because, you know. But yeah, it is one of the reasons I have not left so far. I mean, this spot is not cheap, and like the Bay Area is kind of a weird place to be, but I seem to have landed in a place that actually works pretty well for what I want to be doing, which is exactly this. AWS is interesting, speaking of hosting. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I did an art project a while ago where I ended up needing distributed rendering, and so it was an excuse to get to learn how to do AWS stuff. I ended up using EC2 and SQS, their queuing service, and that was interesting. Did the job pretty well, but it definitely would not have worked on anyone else's infrastructure without a bunch of porting. Maybe I can get back to having normal problems, like it's connected, like the data's connected backwards, not the power is connected backwards. So again, I'm going to twist these together in a pretty much arbitrary order, and we'll see if it works. If not, we'll swap it, just like we just did with the power, unintentionally. Don't do that with power. It's not good with power. If this was a microcontroller or something and not just an optical encoder, that would have certainly broken it. Okay, we still have network. I think I just need to plug the other end in here. And hold on to our pants or something. We've got link lights, 6.7 watts. Let's see if we can drive. Well, first actually let's look at the telemetry. Oh, we already have velocity feedback. Yeah, I'm wondering, like, what is the sign here supposed to be? I think this is supposed to be positive. I think this is backwards. Let's try running it, but it's probably gonna spin out of control and end up hitting a limit. Oh, maybe not. Oh, okay, I guess it is right. Do you want to see what happens if it was going to be wrong? Oh, Aiden's asking about what the graphs run on. That is smoothie charts. The graphs themselves are smoothie charts. The data is coming over a WebSocket, and pretty much everything else is custom but open source, and it's in that TucoFlyer repository if you want to see it. I kind of want to just demo what'll happen if the encoder's backwards. I also haven't actually tested this myself, so it'll be good to make sure the failure mode isn't too bad. I think it'll hit the runaway motor limiter though. So the expected behavior here is the motor will just keep going faster and faster for about 1/3 of a second and then stop, and then maybe start doing the same thing again. Okay, it's plugged in. Polarity is opposite. Here goes nothing. Yep. Limiter did not work that time though. That's interesting. I was not prepared to test whether it would hit the force limiter just then, but maybe we need to try that too. See, now I need to unwind it though, and it actually will not unwind because the sensor... actually, let's put it back into e-stop. And I'm going to just unwind this manually a couple of turns and then feed it through the mechanism. It's like threading a sewing machine. Okay, I'm gonna try that same experiment, but instead of running in the cord, I wanna run out the cord, and then I'll let it go, and I'll see if it stops, or it just starts to jam itself. Okay, I'm about to put on the gas. Okay, the force limiter works at least. It can't tell that the motor has run away, but it can tell that the force is out of range. Alright, that's probably fine. It could be better. And then the force comes back in range and it doesn't do anything, because any out of range errors clear all the gains. Whoa, what? CodeMonkey says threading over the top of the encoder may be better? No. No, definitely not. There are two reasons why that would be bad, at least. Let me show you. So part of the goal here is, so let me just check whether I understand what you're suggesting. So you mean like that? So first of all, this roller is no longer doing anything. If that was the goal, we would not need both of these rollers. So let's just imagine only one of those is there. Part of the problem is now we are putting way more force on the encoder than I actually want to be putting on here. The goal is not to maximize the like side load on that bearing. The goal is to have enough of it to keep it from slipping, but to otherwise minimize it. So that's actually putting way more stress on the encoder bearing than I want. The other reason here is for this load sensor to measure this force, but not that force, I want that cord to be perpendicular to the load cell. And it gets pretty close to perpendicular in this position. So that's the rationale behind this design. Hopefully that makes a little more sense, and let me know if I misunderstood your question. Okay, let's put this back to test it and then make it more permanent. Although I'm saying that, and I should probably actually leave soonish. really like big chunks of time that I get to work in, and it's frustrating that those are often hard to come by. I try to set up my life to have as many chunks of time as I can to just work on this stuff. All right. We got link light. We have closed loop. So there's a different design though. Like if we end up doing another revision of the winch, one of the things I'd like to try doing is having a drive capstan and then a separate motor that's just for taking up the slack in the main spool. And if we do that, the drive capstan probably will have several turns of rope around it to increase the friction there. It's just that right now I don't need that much friction to keep the encoder against the rope. It doesn't really have any trouble with slipping. You just don't need that much force. And you know, and because I'm not actually trying to drive the rope with the capstan, it doesn't really need that. And doing it unnecessarily is just adding extra friction where the cord rubs against itself. Emily says, did a couple of hours of chat just vanish? I think, doesn't Gitter do that a lot? I feel like it's hard to get it to load consistently sometimes. Also, I don't understand the or in your question. I feel like Gitter is weird, regardless of the answer to that question. Alright, well, I think maybe this will be a good stopping point for the stream. I mean, there are better stopping points, but I am hungry and I need to go shopping and get some groceries. So I think maybe I will leave it at this point for now, but we'll try to get back to this ASAP because I've got a bunch of winch equipment just making my shop messy right now, and if it was put together, we'd have a robot instead of a mess. Wouldn't that be great? Oh, Danny Mary is saying no, it'll mess with the bearing. What's that in response to? Was that in response to me or Code Monkey? Anyway, if you have other questions or anything, feel free to. The best place to leave questions are probably either the Gitter chat, my Twitter notifications, or the YouTube comments. But yeah, I also just stream a lot, so you can also just come by sometime. So yeah, I'll see you folks next time, and happy hacking. Thanks to everyone who supports the channel by, you know, patronizing it via the Patreon machine with $1 or $2 a month, you know, or by telling your friends, or by sending hardware. That's what keeps us going. See you next time. Always got to be some post-roll, right, for the encoder. And then you get the post-roll noises.